Mind-muscle connection, for those of you that don't know or aren't familiar with it, is basically being in tune with your muscles as they're being used. So what that means is when you're doing a dumbbell bench press, through the entire motion, you feel your chest stretching throughout the bottom and then contracting at the top. You feel the whole muscle opening and closing. And this applies to all muscles. Every muscle that you train in the gym is going to have a certain length that it stretches to. This is called the eccentric phase. And then a certain tightness it squeezes to. This is called the concentric phase. An easy example actually is a bicep. So when your arm is fully extended, you are in the eccentric phase. Your bicep is the longest it could be from your shoulder to your elbow. This is the highest stretched position. And if you're holding a load like a dumbbell or a cable, you can likely feel your bicep being stretched in this position. And then when you pull it in, curling up, bringing your hand to your shoulder, your bicep becomes smaller. You can usually feel it if you have a large enough bicep. It's balled up, it's contracting. And this is something you want to recognize with all the different muscles in your body. Feeling that stretch, feeling that contraction, and doing that through every rep, through every exercise that you're gonna be doing. It's easier said than done. A lot of times. There's gonna be some muscles that come naturally to you for you to feel how to squeeze and feel how to stretch. Some muscles you're not gonna feel it as much while you're training. Is it actually helpful for you? This really depends on your goals. If your goal is just to train for general health purposes, mind-muscle connection isn't a priority. It's helpful to have, it's important to be able to do it, but it's not necessarily a priority. Whether you feel those muscles or not, those muscles are still gonna be working. So when you do a bench press, if you're doing it properly, you have the right form. Depending on what your joint angles are, that's gonna dictate what muscles you use. And if you have the proper joint ankles, you're using the proper muscles. Pretty straightforward. That applies for all exercises. If your ankles, knees, and hips are in the right places for whether you squat or whether you deadlift, those muscles are going to get worked. When it comes time to focus on hypertrophy, you're focusing on building muscle, mind-muscle connection becomes so much more important. So there was a study done by Brett Contreras, who is known as the glute guy, and he focused on lower body exercises and the activation of those muscle fibers when you think about the muscle and when you don't. And he focused on the glutes, obviously, because that's his thing. He's the glute guy. He put little pads on people's quads, people's hamstrings, people's glutes, and he had them do 4 exercises, I believe. He had them do the Bulgarian split squat, the regular barbell squat, a deadlift, and a single leg RDL. And he tested about 12 or so people, I believe, and he had them do a set where they didn't think about activating their glutes, where they weren't thinking about establishing a mind-muscle connection. They weren't focused on glute squeezing and glute stretching. They were just going through the movement and making sure they have good form. And then a set where they did focus on that, where they did focus on glute squeezing, where they did focus on glute stretching and really thinking about the glute going through the range of motion, extending and contracting properly. And what he found was there was about a 30% increase in muscle fiber recruitment for when you did think about the muscle, when you did establish that mind-muscle connection. And that bodes well for hypertrophy. That bodes well for developing those different muscle groups. That's when a mind-muscle connection is really important, and I think I would say vital to training. Is if your goal is hypertrophy, if your goal is to build muscle, you need to know how to feel your muscle. You need to know how to use your muscle and squeeze that muscle, because those contractions that you do and going through the full eccentric phase, going through the full stretching phase, are really what break down the muscle tissue enough to want to rebuild themselves and to grow. So knowing how to feel that and knowing how to use that to your advantage is key. Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously the most famous bodybuilder of all time, arguably, he was always quoted as saying whenever he was in a building phase, whenever he was in a growing phase, he would visualize his biceps growing to the point where they fill up the whole room. So that is a similar idea where if you visualize the growth, it leads to more growth. Now, how can you establish more of a mind-muscle connection if you have trouble with that? Again, like those muscles are going to be working no matter what if you go through the right movements, if you go through the right joint angles. If you don't feel your glutes while you squat, it's not like your glutes aren't working. They're still working because you need your glutes to stand up. If you didn't have glutes and they weren't working, you wouldn't be able to extend your hips. You wouldn't be able to stand up straight. But they're happening. You get more out of your glutes if you focus on that mind-muscle connection. But if you're new to this, if you never tried this and you don't know how to actually focus it and do it, the best way to feel more and create a stronger connection is by flexing or doing isometric exercises once again. If you are about to squat and you want to feel your glutes more, you want to activate your glutes more when you're squatting, doing frog pumps beforehand, it's like a glute bridge, but the bottoms of your feet are facing each other. So your knees are out wide and you drive your hips to the ceiling. This isolates the glutes. When you bring your hips to the top, pause there and squeeze, This is a good position that will contract the glutes very strongly as opposed to trying to contract them while you're standing. And you can practice in that position holding that squeeze or squeezing and unsqueezing your glutes to create a stronger connection. Now, once you do that, this is basically like priming your body into feeling your glutes better while you squat. Once you do that, you go through the squat, it becomes easier to feel your glutes while you're doing it. Again, like your glutes are still working whether you feel them or not, but feeling them more, it really helps with hypertrophy. That is one way to do it. Same thing with other body parts, like your chest is one that a lot of people struggle feeling, or your lats are one that people really struggle feeling. There is an exercise called palm squeezes, which is literally as it sounds. You take your palms, squeeze them as tight as you can, and you keep it at chest level. So right in front of your chest, you're gonna have your hands face each other, squeeze it as tight as you can. You should feel your chest contract in that position. And doing that between bench press sets will help you get a better mind muscle connection with your chest while you train. With the lats, there's an exercise I found from Cody McBroom a couple years ago that I found really valuable and helped my clients get a better connection with their lats. And that's a half kneeling lat pull-in. You use a cable or a resistance band with this, pull the band down, elbow to your pocket, and then you crunch sideways to really contract your lat. And doing all of that, holding that crunch, and then releasing back up until you feel that stretch again, really establishes a strong mind muscle connection with your lats, so that when you do your first exercise, whether that is a barbell row, whether that's a pull-up, whether that's a deadlift, whatever the case may be, you feel it so much better. That's how you would practice getting a stronger mind muscle connection with the different muscle groups, flexing and contracting them in isometric positions, practicing that until you're able to do it without the exercise, which takes a lot of time to be able to do, especially if you're a smaller person and your goal is to build muscle. Early on, you're going to struggle with that a lot. You're going to really struggle with finding and using those muscles if you're not familiar with using them. It's a learning process. It's a skill you achieve, and every muscle is going to be pretty hard to learn individually. Some, again, will come more naturally than others, but you just got to keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing.